on the YouTubes. Got it. We'll give it one more second while YouTube catches up to me for a change. And we are live. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Johnson, and I'm here with my buddy Eric Garland. Morning, Eric.
Yo, yo, yo. Good morning.
This show is called Close the Distance, and it's the re-release, technically, if you use my StageGate process for media product development, re-release of a webinar series that started in 2020 with the pandemic lockdowns. And by the way, today is very relevant. Our topic for today is very relevant to that earlier iteration of the show. Because E is for economy and economics. E is for econ. And for those of you who haven't seen or didn't join prior iterations of this is our fourth episode on, when was it? I guess it was Tuesday. We launched with introductions. Eric and Monica Nixon, our other interlocutor here, provocateur extraordinaire. We're talking about sort of what it is we do as intelligence analysts. And that, by the way, is our background. We are strategic market and competitive intelligence analysts, which means that we gaze into the void until it gazes back and we make it blink, hopefully. We don't look away. And so if you find yourself attracted to that sort of thing, there's plenty of ways you can become an intelligence analyst as well. But we're going to be talking about what we expect out of 2022 in the year ahead. And we're sort of winding down 2020 here. It's actually Christmas Eve, the 24th of December, 2021, as we're sitting here talking. And the timing is deliberate. I wanted to re-release this for two reasons. One, I've made a promise to do it. A promise to myself, which, by the way, is the only person I'm really ever interested in impressing. And so, Eric, you're helping me fulfill my promise to myself. Thank you again for that, brother. Really appreciate it. And two, because it's a sneak attack. Nobody expects you to do anything the last 10 days of the year. People have expectations that you'll, drink a little too much and sleep in and not work and all that sort of stuff. And that's the perfect time for somebody like us to launch something new. So as we go into 2022, we talked a couple days ago, we did introductions. We're using a construct called STEEPLED. STEEPLED is the way that futurists and intelligence analysts discover their macro environment, and specifically the contingency control factors in that macro environment that provide early warning about the future. The initials stand for social, technological, economic, ecological, political, legal, ethical, and demographic. And those 8 domains of contingency control are really what we're navigating here going into 2022. So we talked about social day before yesterday. Technological was yesterday. Today we're talking about economics. And from a global economics point of view, we're Americans, by the way. Here we sit. I have Madison, Wisconsin, Southern Dane County in the background behind me. Eric, you're coming from St. Louis.
Saint Louis, c'est ça.
Saint Louis, Mo. And what do they call that? Misery loves company, so to speak. I'm sorry, I can't fail to get a misery dig in there. But Eric, quick intro on you. What's Eric Garland all about before we get talking about economy?
I'm a cheerful enemy of corruption.
Well said.
Whether that's intellectual, legal, or otherwise. I think if we extend that metaphor, we are enemies of corruption as intelligence analysts. We go, nope, you didn't consider this. You don't have as much integrity in your view of the world as, you might. Please consider this. And then, also that leads us to think about, whether people are, being corrupt in other, more official capacities. Incidentally, the FBI has said that its number one priority right now is public corruption. Isn't that interesting? Not terrorism. Public corruption. And they're notoriously tight with their words over at the bureau. And when they say this is our number one priority, and you start to see very detailed indictments that are on a hyper local level in some cases. It's like they're not messing around. So anyways, I feel like it's a really good year to be on team integrity and team anti-corruption. So I'm and I like to be cheerful about it no matter what's going on. So I'm a cheerful enemy of corruption.
Well, they call it the dismal science because at the end of the day, you're dead. So I think economics needs a little cheer, and Christmas Eve is a great time to be cheerful about things that are otherwise fairly dismal. It's a great day here.
Let's go to the root of the word there, economia. The nomos. The echo is the house, right? So economia is how you run your house.
Yep.
And how we all bring home the bacon, as it were. And it's too bad that it's thought of as a dismal science, because who doesn't enjoy walking in, with a big, shopping cart full of stuff, right? And at the end of the day, we all come back to our individual homes and see our kids, or whatever, and eat and be merry. And so if you think of economics as a bunch of numbers that are supposed to line up, I'm reminded of accounting, which is also known as a pack of lies agreed upon. The numbers don't tell the story. What tells the story is the economia of how the house is run. And I just think of that as big bag of groceries coming on in. And why is that the dismal science? I mean, it's so joyful when you think about it.
Well, I'm reminded of the final act of the Christmas Carol, which is Scrooge discovers that today is all he has. He is surrounded by people in need. He has plenty, and he decides to send a little boy to go buy the fattest turkey in the window so that he can gift the Cratchits with a Christmas to remember, and then to repent, to repent of his greed and selfishness, and to find a way to be a human again, find his humanity in that. And ultimately it took a view of the future that ultimately showed how what folly his greed had been, in order for him to have a sense of repentance and to come around to that.
Well, that's that is the story. A Christmas Carol is what launched Charles Dickens's literary career in earnest. I mean, he had publishing deals, is my understanding, and Christmas was not even thought of as that much of a big deal for in the Anglo sphere. Easter, of course, most Christian folks, Easter is considered the more the higher holy day, and so basically our boy Charles Dickens put Christmas on the map. It was just kind of an afterthought before that book, which blows my mind. You could write something that cool, and that would you change the future of holidays and how people celebrate them. It's just wild. I hope to have some effect like that at some point. But yeah, it's a redemption story. It is, and it involves a futurist. Now that you mention it, I had not thought of until this very second, Mr. Johnson. I had not thought of Ghost of Christmas Future is a very, very accurate futurist. This is what you're lining up for, bro, and you're gonna burn.
Yeah,
and it was and it's good that they made these ghosts or supernatural apparitions, because normally when we tell people as strategic intelligence analysts something they don't like to hear, we feel our butt cheeks skidding across the pavement outside. I like it when they throw me feet first. I have a chance at landing. Or if someone wants to get in the industry, I'm like, yo, I have been thrown out of more boardrooms than you've ever been in.
Or bedrooms, for that matter. Who knows?
I don't get thrown out of bedrooms. A little humble brag, but no, I get thrown out of boardrooms because I say things that are inconvenient, and that's the more common reaction. So you have to be a ghost, and you have to be able to really essentially on mission from God, in order for Scrooge ended up meeting the one futurist he couldn't fire, or cut the budget on.
And that's kind of what it takes, frankly, to be an analyst, and to do it long term, to do it as a calling. And I think that's, for those who want to do this kind of work, that's kind of the caveat emptor. Part of this is that you better have a thick skin, because you will be asked to compromise reality, to compromise the truth, right? Our product truth. That truth is really, really hard for a lot of people to wrap their brains around. One of the constructs, by the way, a couple of days ago that I introduced was the notion of the chisel tip, and this geometric image of a cylinder that is cut on two sides to form a blade. And when looked at from one side, it's a square. When looked at from the bottom, it's a circle. When looked at from perpendicular, it is a triangle. The chisel tip geometry is truth. And the shadow cast, if you shine light against it from different angles, are all true statements. But it is this curation and accumulation of perspective, that ultimately is how we do what we do. We get perspectives from different observers on this truth. And those perspectives, when put together, give us a higher resolution picture of reality. And so we are interpreters of reality. We question everything until we're sure, until we defeat a threshold of uncertainty. And that uncertainty allows us to act. So our product being truth, intelligence being in the process by which truth is produced, and then the yield of that product is really the action that our clients can take as a result of having confidence in that interpretive exercise. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, we made mention of Missouri here, and one of the most famous Missourians was Harry S. Truman, and they called him "Give him hell, Harry." And he remarked upon that nickname. He says, "I don't give him hell. I give him the truth, and it feels like hell."
Buck stops here, so to speak.
Unfortunately, the truth often feels like hell. When you think about the number of narratives that are out there, and that we are kind of in the business of stripping narratives away down to a factual basis, and we can play this into, let's go right in for economics here. I think people are starting to figure out that their assumptions about economics are more narrative driven than they were factually driven, because you have, I can't get this, give me a couple minutes, I can find it on my computer, a chart of GDP and what sectors the total American GDP, which sector results in what percentage, manufacturing, agriculture, blah, 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 and over time. And starting in 1980 and peaking nowish, I don't think it's changed at all, the financial services sector went from like 5% or 4% to like 40 or 50% of the way we calculate GDP, because they have fantasy football level products that they sell. Their risk analysis, their collected debt obligations where they don't even own the assets that underlie the thing, and now we add crypto on top of it and all this other stuff, and it's like, at some point you go, well, wait a minute, we're just making a narrative up, and at the end of the day, people still have to go in and buy some food at a grocery store, and they have to get around town. Now, they do that in a bicycle, or they do that in a car, or how do they do that? Well, that probably costs some. How much does that cost? There is the chisel tip is still out there. There's reality. But you look at that last 40 years of, 42 now, I guess, since 1980, of that line trending up for financial products as part of the economy, as opposed to manufacturing, as opposed to agriculture, as opposed to tangible things that you can point to very easily. That, we have gotten involved in a big, narrative generation, economy, essentially. That, we're telling you this is how much this number is worth, and this is why you need to have 2 jobs, or you need to have a master's degree where you used to only need a bachelor's degree, or a bachelor's instead of a high school education. That's all made up. Now, the question is how much veracity is behind the narratives. All of our narratives are inaccurate. How we see ourselves, how we see others, how others see us. It's humanity, right? Or as our friend Max Nelson, great thinker of intelligence, says, all intelligence is wrong. It's just a question of whether it's useful, because you cannot perceive that chisel tip from every possible angle, and you cannot deliver it to every audience. It is wrong in some regard. Now, question is how wrong and how useful, because there's there's intelligence that can be wrong and useful, because it'll get you to change your how you act, your decisions that you're going to make. But we're getting a chance here with the economy to go, all right, well, what are we doing here, folks? Because our perception of the world is it needs some update. We need some facts to underlie the narrative, and people are talking about, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and all. Their wealth increased 40% in 2 years since the COVID thing hit or whatnot. It's like, why?
Yeah.
We just had, I forget if did you and me and Monica talk about this before, where Treasury FinCEN, that's the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, which is the intelligence agency attached to the U.S. Treasury, one of the least known and most deadly, as I refer to them, the Treasury FinCEN death robot of death. They make house calls. They just disclosed a few days ago that the housing bubble of the 2000s was due to money laundering. And so I think we were talking in prior episodes here about the television shows about bathrooms and flipping houses, and how that was kind of strange. We now find out that there were some of the housing craze, the narrative around the housing in the 2000s, that was really money that came from slave labor. In the cotton fields of one of the stands, and then laundered through Switzerland and the offshores to here. That's meth money. That was opioid money. That was all sorts of illicit activity money. That's because that's the only reason you need to launder anything. We don't launder our own incomes, right? Or you and I don't, anyhow, because it's like we're proud of what we do. So, how your tax return is structured is different for every individual. But, if your fundamental activity is selling, running guns illicitly, then you got to wash that money. That's the only reason you launder money, is because it's mob activity, or you're evading tax, or both. Because mob activities evade tax by definition. That the number one thing that people buy a home, that was adulterated with mob money, and that now we have an institution that's coming out and going, hey guys, and they are the authority. They are, and for those who don't know how Treasury FinCEN works, they are an intelligence agency. They, I believe, can borrow some of the power of the NSA to have a look inside of financial transactions. I.e., they may break into stuff around the world. NSA, the National Surfing Association, is a notoriously, tight-lipped group. So we can't be sure, because it's all classified on what they do. But FinCEN is the authority on money flows around the world. For those guys to come out and go, hey, the housing crisis. Remember that, when everyone went crazy and people started flipping their condos at each other and it ratcheted up 30% each time. That was money laundering. You want to talk about peeling a narrative off? Like, nope, that was slave labor in cotton fields. Surprise! That's why somebody was willing to buy your 3-bedroom for 23% more than you had just paid for it. That's why.
Well, and just to interject there, that's the fundamental structure of the derivatives underlying the market for mortgages. We're not saying that you as a homeowner were endorsing or participating in, the international slave and human trafficking trade intentionally. What we're describing here is that a system has been erected, no pun intended, to exploit human frailties and the desire to evade the law. To the human lawlessness has been financed, and there is an overt marketplace in which that human lawlessness has been concealed. And so, to the point of what happens in 2022, there is a bubble blowing right now around a bunch of different asset classes. And you might be a crypto asset holder, you might be a real estate asset holder, you may be a securities asset holder, you may own debt instruments like T-bills and bonds at the local level or corporate debt. But all of those assets are being inflated by the money supply. A couple days ago, I showed M2.
Yeah, we were doing M2. What's that?
Yeah.
And sorry,
I'm an Austrian economist. I'm a Norwegian, Swedish, Danish guy from Wisconsin. Son of a dairy farmer and all that goes along with that. But as an economist, I'm a believer in the Austrian school, which would dictate that the money supply drives prices, and that ultimately price discovery is what markets are for. Authoritarianism, which we touched on a little bit a couple days ago when we talked Esses for Social, authoritarianism is there in order to disrupt price discovery and to regulate prices based upon wishful thinking of those who want to retain power and get reelected, so to speak, which is the number one job of every politician. The primary role, it would seem, and we'll talk political here in a couple of days, but the primary role of, I think, many public servants today is self-servanthood in order to remain in power and in control. And ultimately, it would appear that the chairman of the Federal Reserve, one of the most powerful people in this economy, is going to stay. I think formally that happens in February, but it looks like Jerome Powell is probably going to stay there unless there's some sort of revolution in the legislature, which would dictate that he's got to go and that somebody a little more accommodating comes in. But as we sit here today on the 24th of December in 2021, inflation is out of control. Inflation is not prices, by the way. It's not consumer prices. It's not producer prices. Inflation is the money supply. And there's more dollars chasing the same amount of goods.
And nobody's been keeping track of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been going. That's part of that. The GDP I'm talking about for 40 years here. Some of that is those banks have been allowed without any remit from the American people to lend not just at a 9-to-1 rate to whatever the hell they want to 1 rate. And, their endless ability to increase the money supply, not through the U.S. Treasury, very loosely regulated, if at all, is why prices have been, when people criticize capitalism, I'm like, we haven't tried it yet. I'm looking forward to I'd love to try capitalism. We have a mix of, authoritarian socialism and, it's like, winner take all law. It's the law of the jungle as long as all the prey is, in a big bucket and the lions can come over. I mean,
exactly. So I don't know if you've read this book before. It's a pretty quick read, but this guy is still alive. G. Edward Griffin. I've seen him on YouTube a few times, and he's an economist and entrepreneur, author. But this story, The Creature from Jekyll Island, is the story about how the banks created the Federal Reserve. I think it was 1913. Jekyll Island is a resort. Now, today it's a resort off the coast of South Carolina, I think. And all the bankers, any banker who was anybody, met there to figure out how to do the Federal Reserve, what became the Federal Reserve. And I believe Congress the following year enacted the Federal Reserve Act, which created the Fed and allowed the Fed to be the sole producer of fiat currency, US dollars, in the United States of America in perpetuity, essentially. The Federal Reserve, however, and many people find this shocking when they discover this, is not a government agency. The chairman of the Federal Reserve is nominated by the president, and I believe Congress ratify that nomination, but it's not a government agency. It's a private made up of the banks who control the currency in the United States. But anyway, my book tip of the day, if you haven't found a Christmas present for the loved ones in your life, pick them up a copy of The Creature of Jekyll Island, and I'm sure they'll love you forever for blowing their view of how the money system works here in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, there's a loose statutory background to all that, right? I mean, it's like you go, well, so it's nominated by the president. What is it? So do we vote for that? Well, see, there are these banks. You mean the banks that get to stick their hand in the federal treasury whenever they F it up so bad? Exactly. And still get to take the bonuses that year? Yep. Tell us more about this, again, and I'm sure most people who read me in other spaces, are going to think that I sound like Ron Paul, on Crank. Because they don't see because very people don't ask my opinions on some of the stuff. They assume, for example, that I'm, because I've criticized some Republican figures, that I'm a big liberal activist. That's how some people have described me. I'm like, but we have the weirdest socialized. We have these gigantic welfare queens that are these banks, and there's no statutory basis for them to do what they do. This Federal Reserve System, there's no legal basis that allows them that power, because if I don't get to pick who the CEO of JP Morgan is, and that institution, why? Because they're big, I even get a say in the Secretary of Defense when you think about it, right? Yep. Like if you vote for president and your guy your woman gets in the executive branch, they appoint a cabinet, and the Secretary of Defense has all kinds of classified activities that we don't get to know about. It's none of our damn business. That's tightly held for national security reasons, but we get to pick them. We get to pick who the Secretary of Defense is or the Secretary of the Treasury is, but we don't get to pick. So these banks constitute the money supply in this country, but we don't get to vote on who runs JP Morgan. But they're so big that we don't ever ask if the Department of Defense is not making good on its bills, because they're part of the country. So whatever the budget is is determined by our Congress, which, also has a say over the Treasury, which prints the official money. There's no, that's all very legal, right? Whatever we spend on defense, we spend on defense. And it's all, there's a legal basis for all of it. So well, they're running low on or they're not paying their bills this week, because we had to invade someplace. Well, I don't care that it's the Defense Department. That's, they're the guys who buy the jets and the aircraft carriers and the tanks. No problem there. But when JP Morgan and Citibank and others, when they ran this country into a ditch in the late 2000s, they just got to dig their hand right in the till. I had to lay my 3 employees off. Ended up moving to St. Louis. Life is funny. I didn't get paid back for that. I didn't get to go, surely I get my 2010 bonus. No, I did not. And their excuses for why. Well, look, I mean, we have contracts with these people. You can't get talent like this. You mean like the talent that just told everybody that their condo's worth 35% extra every year over year? Actually, I was around that time I was in a group house in DC having a real great time on Q Street Northwest, and one of our roommates had a friend who was in grad school. And just for an experiment, walked in to see how creditworthy he was. He had never worked. And Citibank set him up with $300,000 to buy a house.
Oh.
Yeah, this was about 2003 or 4, right around there, 2003, 2004. And, he didn't take the loan, by the way. He was like, y'all are insane. I'm getting an English degree. And we were I remember us sitting around the table going, this is a hell of a bubble, what they're doing with this. I mean, that's a microcosm story there, but it's like, this gentleman was like, they're insane. I am not that creditworthy. There is no reason to think that you can give me $300,000 and then I will give you back $300,000 in interest. There is no fact in evidence that would show that. So what is wrong with you people?
Other than triangulation of his characteristics against whoever they do have evidence about. And I think that's sort of the story of the 2000s, the aughts, there was a predictive algorithm that was being developed inside of every business that would allow that business to forecast somewhat reliably what a particular customer would do and then target that customer for acquisition from a competitor. A lot of what you think of the competitive intelligence world of that era, and I say of that era because I don't think it's the same necessarily anymore, a lot of what it was for was to figure out how those apparatus needed to be developed and deployed in order to reliably transfer market share, because candidly, that's why CEOs get paid so much. If you can transfer 1% of $1 billion in market share from a competitor to your organization, I'd say maybe you've earned $1 million. It's only 10% of the upside in terms of what you've done there. If you can move 10 billion, maybe you've earned 10 million in salary, or 100 million, as the case often is. And I think that's where the polarization of our society along class lines is one of those economic phenomena that I find really fascinating. And I think that's really the hidden economic story that the pandemic has concealed from observers. And I think you and I are clued into it, but I don't think many of the people who are probably going to watch this necessarily are seeing that as those ultra wealthy asset holders, the people who own real estate and debt and securities and crypto, as those assets appreciated, inflated, so to speak, because the money supply, the denominator, kept increasing, everyone else got poorer. Whatever it is, whatever money you've got in the bank right now is going to buy you less than it did yesterday. And the hidden tax of price appreciation is the way in which those who control government and ultimately industry extract wealth from the population. They're extracting wealth from us. There is no Republican, Democrat, polarity here in terms of their willingness to take milk from you as a milk cow. That, by the way, is how I've heard it described. You don't need to worry about government if you're the milk cow, because they're going to benevolently come around and milk you on some regular periodic basis. It's when you turn into the beef cow that you've got to worry about the people in charge. Anyway,
this podcast, two guys from dairy backgrounds making dairy jokes. I mean, the fact that
it's when you can't produce milk anymore that you become.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. You can't milk them. You got to ship them. Mm-hmm. And do you have a cow on your mug there?
This actually is a goat. So the interesting story about this mug. This is from Al Johnson's Swedish restaurant in Sister Bay, where you and I went on vacation a few years ago.
Where they got goats on the roof. Yeah, dude.
Goats on the roof. This is from there, and this is a Swedish.
Alrighty.
There's the flag. I shouldn't show
you.
There
we go.
A dirty mug. My wife's going to kill me for showing off my really dirty mug. But the Swedes would say, if that cow isn't giving milk anymore, you eat it. And I think that's where we're getting to from a economic decade that we're on the footstep hereof. I learned an interesting fact the other day that only 67 million Americans out of the 332 million, or however many there are right now, only about less than a quarter of them pay federal income tax. I don't know if you knew that. Almost nobody pays federal income tax anymore. And that number is getting smaller. And so I think the issue there is that the concentration of wealth and the concentration of productive income is the thing that the government is trying to figure out how it's going to extract in a world where decentralization takes assets and economic activity out of sight, potentially, or at least anonymizes it. It's still visible on blockchain, but you don't know who necessarily is connected to it.
Well, it's okay. Now we've come to the merger of technology and economics here, where we can now talk about the mystery of the hidden, the unseen hand behind a lot of market moves here is offshore banking, which depended on a certain. I think we touched on this yesterday around the technology side. We're talking about we're able to establish facts a lot better, with all these different technologies and GPS and this and that. There's a whole lot in this world for narrative creation, as we've been talking about in economic terms, that requires a looser relationship to facts in order to make it all go down. I mean, I think, if people really understood what the Wall Street banks did in the 2000s and how they got paid out of it and got to do it the same thing again, those dudes would have gotten a free pitchfork ride if people actually understood it. But a hidden part of a lot of that was, offshore banking that was hiding, transnational organized crime money, sanctioned regime money. Like just when you sanction a regime, I'm not saying we shouldn't sanction them. Having a narco-terrorist organization like the Venezuelan Maduro regime, sanctioning them is the appropriate thing to do. Iran, North Korea, same thing. Yeah. But when you do, you create another market for that money to flow another way, and that's where we've had. We've had definitely since the early to mid part of the 20th century, a few banking regimes what's called offshore, though, nothing could be more on land than Switzerland. But of course, the Swiss were the go-tos for this in the 30s. But the offshore, refers to mainly Caribbean banks. And the reason that they needed to be employed was because we lost our minds one time and we outlawed beer.
Right.
Prohibition led to offshore banking because Meyer Lansky and the Chicago outfit made so much frickin' money on selling beer to Midwesterners. I mean, you think? You think? I mean, easily the stupidest policy decision in human history. I challenge you to come up with a dumber policy than outlawing beer and, and forcing the most popular product. I mean, if you understand, the Sumerians paid, talking about economics, they paid their workers in beer. It was a currency. It was a net good, right? And you go, that, the first writings of the Egyptians, beer recipes, right? Okay, this is alcohol, popular product for humans. We're going to outlaw it outright. So all that money went into organized crime. Because, there were organized crime syndicates. There were people that were used to petty theft and whatnot from Sicily or, wherever. And then we took the revenue stream from the most popular product in world history, beer, and we gave it to crooks. And Meyer Lansky helped write the banking regulations in Switzerland as head of the Chicago outfit. The main, all the movies are about La Cosa Nostra and Le Cinque Famiglie, the five families in New York there. But the real cognoscenti know that the actual mob is running in Chicago. And it was, that was the central hub, because you got Great Lakes and you got down to St. Louis and over to Denver and, Canada. Easy access to Canada, where they're all sitting up there going, well, we're not going to stop making whiskey. Well, no problem. Well, we'd love to do business with you. They made so much money that first, this concept of the laundromat. Why? Because it took coins. It was the only way you could get, because you couldn't keep track of those financial transactions the way a bank had to. Even though banks, you had more options for fudging numbers when everything was on paper, right? But nevertheless, these are guys that wanted no records, so they had car washes, laundromats, anything that was coin operated, vending machines. That's where they put their cash flow in so they could clean their money. And literally, Meyer Lansky had bought up so many of these laundromats and car washes around here, here being the United States, that he starts stashing money in the Caribbean, and he basically stressed out the Caribbean banks, and that's when the Chicago outfit mob helped write Switzerland's banking laws, because they're like, hey, we need some help over here. We got a problem. We don't know where to put all our money from all our stuff here. So, and then you have you get the Nazi regime, and you get the Kremlin, and you have money moving in ways that people don't understand. And it's like the greatest story that's never been told is that there's this whole second economy that is not kept track of. Now, the interesting part of like blockchain and all that, it's like, oh, hey, well, we can use computer processors to make something that cannot be counterfeited. This block of code, there's only one like it. So, and we can make this all shared between zillions of computers, so everything will be on record. Now, it's funny. There are people that are using this as if it's, it'll let them do something anonymous, which is the worst way to do anything anonymous, because the second you ping, you tie one individual to that transaction by way of the hash or whatever, the coin wallet, whatnot, it's transparent to the world. And that's something that, by the way, law enforcement agencies don't even need a warrant for. They might need a warrant to get, hey, do you have a coin wallet, or do you have one of these crypto things? They might need a warrant for that. But the second they have that information, poof, they have the whole world. And we're going to be able to tell the story of economics without all the obfuscation, without the lies, without the, it's the end of offshore banking. And a lot of people don't know that in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, at the end of 2020 was written into the defense bill was about how they were going to require the people that own LLCs to be identified onshore and off. Mm-hmm. And that to have an LLC or another corporate structure, you're going to need to, it's going to be like getting a passport, you know. And we had a little bit of tightening up around this after 9/11. If you recall, know your customer laws came in. I don't know if you were, you know, starting new parts of Aurora WDC or whatnot, but I remember, you know, when Olson, they're like, no, we need your passport if we're going to open. That's around the time Competitive Futures opened up its doors. And it was post 9/11 and they just needed more documentation. Well, they're cranking that up. There's going to be some biometrics involved. Now, for those of us who only have a few LLCs or, you know, very simple structures, it's no issue. But if you're a consultancy that maybe does 50,000 of them a year and structures them to hide them very intentionally and layers a trust on a corporation that's owned by another trust, which is owned by this, all that, being suddenly having to say where that money's going and who owns that, who is the benefit, the UBO, the ultimate beneficial owner. That was written in, bro. That was written into the defense bill 12 months ago.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I mean, you want?
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about want to see how the world is going to change. You know, again, you know, transparency, and we were talking about how transparency, the wrong way to do it is in terms of all your personal data as well. I'm not doing anything wrong. You can spy on me. Well, know, the three of us, we cast aspersions at that. That's very good. That's very useful for dictatorships and whatnot. So no, I love the idea. Privacy is a good thing, except in banking. You know, or that something can be private to, you know, prying eyes, that not everybody is allowed to just come in and check out what your finances are like, but that there's a government that does, and that you are part of that government, and and that government is legal, established under a constitution and all that. You know, just think about how different life is going to be when you've got transparency of who really owns what, because there's a whole bunch of people whose stories don't add up. I mean, ours do, and I often I marvel at how many people, or some of my closest friends in the world, are from the intelligence world, and I sometimes marvel at how, you know, trustworthy and honest and transparent the intel people I know are. Because I don't know if it's they just know it's not worth bullshitting anybody. It's like, you know, in our community, it's like, why waste your time? That's what we do, is unpack that. You know, but you know, I find and maybe ironic to some, but the intel people are the most straight ahead people that I know. And because of what we do, unpacking these more complicated narratives, I think we in the intel world, we know that not everybody like that. Not everybody is as transparent and able to tell you like how the sausage gets made, like we are.
Not only are most people not like that, I think most people find that stuff unthinkable. You know, that we would actually go out of our way to be that curious about how, you know, things really work. And I say this, you know, I'm a lover of people. I love everybody, and even my enemies, which is, you know, part of my ethical and moral, you know, doctrine, is that they're enemies because of how they've defined themselves. I need to figure out a way to become friends and neutralize their hostility somehow. But I will say, I think it's a natural selection process for those intelligence people who survive. I think a lot of the dropouts drop out because the reality of being an intelligence analyst is anathema to their moral compass, and that they have constructs of reality which wouldn't survive, you know, an honest assessment of what, you know, the chisel tip of what the truth really means. And so that's why the folks you're talking about, those experienced intelligence analysts and thinkers, philosophers, even is a word I'll use to describe the life calling, the magna vocatio, your great calling as an intelligence analyst and interpreter of reality. I think those people who are in it to win it, so to speak, they're in it for life. We're both CI fellows. I'll actually invoke that identity in a second. The Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows, the CI Fellows for short, is a group of, I think, about 100 now, or thereabouts. Hey, you got your obelisk right there. I don't know where my obelisk is. It's around here someplace. But the CI Fellows just had their conference last month, or the month before, and they are a really eclectic group of people who are from our priesthood. This is a priesthood in that sense, that there are professional practices and standards and expectations that you have to have. And I will just also share, I was on the selection committee for the last several years. And the selection committee this past year, we took great pains to qualify the nominees. Not everybody got approved. And by the way, most people don't get approved for nomination to then stand for the broader membership's vote. Most people don't make it past that cut. I was in that group that sort of approved the slate. They call it the nominating committee, and I think that's probably about right. The nominating committee also approves the executive committee nominees, by the way. My kid brother, Derek Johnson, and our good friend August actually are the VP and president of the fellows coming up here in about, a week from today. They take the reins from the last XCOM, and for at least the next 12 months, August and Derek will be sort of directing those activities. And I really hope that we can connect up with that crew and draft them into this little Stochasm squad, as I'm referring to our little collaboration here. And by the way, we're missing Monica Nixon. Monica's on the slopes in Sun Valley, Utah, by the way. I think it's in Utah. And she's enjoying her Christmas break. She's been joining us in the mornings for these conversations, and took the day off to go skiing today. So good on you, Monica. Get a little action for me. But I'd like to get the fellows involved in this conversation and figure out sort of how we interpret the macro environment. And then I'm going to kind of take us out here. We've been on for almost an hour, and I want to kind of tie this off. And I'll give you a chance you'll have the last word, my man. I hope that as we are exploring these domains of control, that as you think of these as uncontrollables, it doesn't mean that you can't act. It means that most of your actions are coping strategies. From an economic standpoint, my own personal choice making around how my household, to go back to economia, how my household is going to cope with the uncertainties and uncertainties coming in the year ahead. I am prepared to not have the same level of income that I would need to have to sustain our current lifestyle, my wife and 4 kids and first kid in college and whatnot. I am prepared to produce my own food if necessary. And I live on a farm out here in South Madison where I can do that sort of thing. There's a tractor on the other side of the camera if you need to see that. And I think, the lesson that I'll just share for everybody is the Great Depression of the 1930s taught us a lot about humility. And here's where I'll pass it back to you, Eric, for the final word. Humility is the characteristic that I think is cyclical. And I don't see a lot of humility in our civilization right now. And I think that's going to naturally self-correct. And economics is how self-correction happens. And here's my parting shot, and I'll look up who said this because I can't remember off the top of my head. There's a saying that pride is the salve that deadens the pain of stupidity. I think that's just beautiful. I'll look it up while you're giving us
love
your.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that for observations like this, I have to go to my Vermont accent, but that good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So the self-correcting mechanism there is humility, and if you don't have humility, you're probably not looking hard enough at you, because if you're listening to this, you're a human being, and chances are you make some dumb decisions, no matter how smart you are. And if you don't know that, you just haven't looked at it enough. And again, maybe this is a key element of intelligence analysis, is that you get to see behind so many narratives, and you get to see so much. We're analysts of folly, if you will. Because actually, help me unpack this here. You, as a 25 plus year intelligence analyst, isn't the only reason we're around because people lie and deceive, and that we go, there would be no need for this job title at all if everybody was exactly as they say. So we're, whether it's, the competitors starting to advertise they're going to have this new product in 6 months, and it turns out it's going to be a year and a half or whatnot. They don't all have to be whoppers on the line of like what happened with the housing crisis or whatnot. But basically, people lie. And so we're here to go, no, we just check up.
Exactly. And, I found the quote, by the way, whoever Frank Leahy is, and again, I've led a sheltered life. The name doesn't ring a bell off the top of my head. Egotism is the anesthetic that dulls the pain of stupidity, is the Forbes attribution. And who am I to argue with Forbes? But to your point, I think, if the truth was obvious, and the truth was not being obscured by those who find the truth inconvenient, there wouldn't be a role for us. I think the same is true of the law, by the way. You and I earlier today, and we're talking about, the law, and how, frankly, by the way, I'm a Christian by upbringing. And so Christmas is an important part of my season for me. And I think that I will criticize Christians by saying, if Christians all followed the law, or if Christians all followed Jesus like they say they do, we wouldn't need the law. There would be no purpose for the law. The law is what ultimately convicts us of our indiscretions and our selfishness and our hatred. And ultimately, those are the things that Jesus described as being ungodly, and that there are a different set of qualities that we need to inherit from him in order for us to truly be followers. And ultimately, that's my big Christian message for today, Christmas message for the day. But I think, where I'll sort of leave that is, if everybody acted that way, we wouldn't need the law. If everybody told the truth, you wouldn't need intelligence analysts around to figure out who the liars are. And that ultimately is sort of what we're for. It's our utility value in the world. And so I'm just going to say thank you, for joining me here on Christmas Eve morning and talking about economics in the year ahead. We've had a few watching us on YouTube, and so I hope you all have enjoyed this. Are you good to talk on Christmas morning about ecology, ecological topics? Are you available tomorrow?
I'm there tomorrow.
Well, at the risk of marital bliss in my household, we're going to do another one of these streams tomorrow. And so we've done social, technological, we've done economic. We're going to do ecological control factors tomorrow. And hopefully Monica will be able to join us, but come back about 8:30 Central Time, and we'll be live streaming this again. If you want to join some of the more intimate parts of where I hope this show will take us, this is called Dawn Patrol. It's an extension of the Close the Distance program that I launched last year, and I'm relaunching here in the year ahead. So final words, Mr. Garland, for our viewers.
God bless us, everyone.
Oh, man, perfect. Couldn't have said that any better, my man. I love you. I hope you have a
Love you
very
too.
Merry Christmas Eve.